The audience burst into laughter under the brilliant glare of the studio lights. It was live television, and the crowd, already primed for sarcasm, leaned into every jab. Megan Pierce, the host, known across the country for her sharp wit and irreverent tone, leaned forward with a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Her voice rang out with mock sincerity as she posed the question. "So, Sylvester, after everything you've been through, your losses, your pain, you still believe there's someone up there watching out for you?" The laughter swelled again, fed by the rhythm of the show. But the camera, without cutting away, lingered on Stallone. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply reached up and gently touched the small silver cross resting beneath his collar. His eyes, calm and unwavering, stared ahead, not at the host, not at the crowd, but into something deeper. He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He simply felt. And then, just before the room could pivot back to levity, something shifted. A voiceover, subtle but tense, broke the moment. What the host didn't realize was that she was about to experience something she never expected. An encounter that would not only challenge her understanding of faith, but might very well change the course of her life. Sylvester Stallone wasn't just a Hollywood legend. He was the reflection of a man who had lost deeply, loved fiercely, and still stood, not because of fame, not because of physical strength, but because of something the world had long tried to dismiss. That night, it was faith. Stay with us to the end to see how this unforgettable moment unfolds. And hey, before we begin, let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? The studio lights were almost too bright. Hot, white beams crisscrossing above like the inside of a Vegas boxing ring. The cameras glided silently across the polished floor while a full audience waited, murmuring with anticipation. It wasn't just another episode of Pierce at Night, the late-night talk show that built its brand on sharp wit and the kind of sarcasm that danced dangerously close to cruelty. It was the special guest that had everyone abuzz, a man known as much for his fists on screen as for the grief he rarely spoke of in public. Sylvester Stallone. To some, he was Rocky. To others, Rambo. But tonight, he was just a man in his 70s, walking onto a soundstage in Burbank, California, with millions watching from their couches, coffee tables, and quiet bedrooms across the country. Megan Pierce, the host, strode into view in a crisp navy suit and heels that clicked like a metronome. Her voice rang out, confident, biting, trained. "Tonight's guest," she declared, pausing as if savoring the build-up, "has boxed in the ring, battled in jungles, and somehow found his way into America's heart. Actor, writer, icon, and apparently preacher." She let the word linger like an accusation before flashing a toothy grin. "Please welcome Sylvester Stallone." The applause erupted like thunder rolling through a canyon. Phones lifted, fans chanted, "Rocky! Rocky!" as if time had folded in on itself, and it was 1976 again. Then Stallone appeared, not in designer flash, not with swagger, but with calm, heavy steps. He wore dark jeans, a black blazer, and a simple gray shirt. But what caught the eye, subtle, unannounced, was the small silver cross hanging from his neck, visible just beneath his open collar. It wasn't polished. It wasn't part of a costume. It looked real, lived in, a relic from a life that had seen both glory and heartbreak. He waved gently, nodded, and took his seat across from Megan, who leaned back with the relaxed posture of someone preparing for a sparring match. They began with pleasantries, Megan asked about his latest project, a film about veterans returning home, inspired by real letters from the 1970s. He spoke softly about the script, about spending time at Walter Reed and sitting with men who couldn't sleep unless their backs were to a wall. He talked about being a father, about how he still worked out twice a day, because the body remembers pain and it respects consistency. The audience laughed, relaxed, but Megan wasn't here for nostalgia. She'd earned her reputation pushing boundaries, and tonight would be no different. "So, Sly," she said, crossing her legs with a sharp movement, "I've read that you still wear a cross, that you pray, that you believe in something." She smiled, but her eyes held challenge. "After everything life has thrown at you, losing your son, your marriage, do you really believe someone's up there watching out for you?" The audience chuckled, nervous laughter, half expecting a quip, maybe a clever comeback. Stallone didn't laugh. He didn't shift in his seat. Instead, he glanced down slightly, letting his fingers graze the small silver cross as it rested against his chest. Not clutching it, not making a scene, just touching it like someone checking their pulse. Megan waited, smirk intact, pressing the moment. "You sure it's not just a habit, a relic? I mean, come on. Faith is great for scripts, sure, but in real life?" Another ripple of chuckles, a few claps. Stallone remained silent. His presence, even in stillness, carried weight. The audience, sensing something had changed, quieted. The show's director, sitting behind glass in the control room, whispered, "Stay on him. Don't cut away." And so the camera stayed, focused on that face. Not a young man anymore, not an action hero, but someone older, worn and wise, in a way you don't get without grief. Then Megan leaned in again, voice lighter but pointed. "Seriously, you've lived through a lot. Real stuff. The kind that leaves people bitter. Doesn't faith just sugarcoat it?" There was no sarcasm this time, no punchline, just a question with teeth. Stallone looked up, and for the first time, met her gaze fully. His voice, when it came, was soft. "If I'm still standing after all that, it wasn't just luck. It was only 11 words. But the way he said them, without defense, without apology, made the room feel smaller, closer, as if someone had pressed pause on the world. For a long moment, no one spoke. The audience didn't move. Even Megan seemed caught off guard. Her next question never made it past her lips. Behind them, a massive LED screen, typically used for promo footage, flickered unexpectedly. The producers had cued it earlier to show scenes from his filmography. Instead, a different reel began to play. It started with a photograph, grainy, dim, of Stallone outside Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, standing beside the gravestone of his son, Sage. His head was bowed, his shoulders hunched beneath a long black overcoat. No entourage, no press, just a father in mourning. Then another image. Stallone in a hospital hallway, face drawn, hand wrapped around someone else's. No press release, no context. Then a photo from a gas station in Inglewood. Him kneeling beside a stranger's car, helping reattach a tire. No cameras, just kindness. The screen flickered, faded. The audience remained silent. Megan shifted, visibly shaken, but not combative. "You wear that cross," she said quietly. "But does it really mean something? Or is it just a symbol?" She sounded unsure now. Less a performer, more a person. Stallone looked at her, not with judgment, but understanding. "I don't wear it for fashion," he said, voice steady. "I wear it for memory, for forgiveness, for survival." There was no applause, no cue for music, Just that one sentence, honest, worn, like a coat you've had for decades. The audience sat in complete silence, some blinking back tears, others frozen in thought. Megan leaned back slightly, her fingers folding into her palm as if holding something invisible. The moment hadn't been scripted. It hadn't even been planned. But something had shifted, and everyone in the room knew it. Stallone didn't say more. He didn't need to. The cross at his neck swayed gently as he breathed. A quiet rhythm in a room that, for the first time all night, had forgotten how to laugh. Backstage, producers watched the monitors in tight-lipped silence. What had started as a routine celebrity interview was veering into unfamiliar, unsettling territory. The kind where laughter no longer filled the air, where silence became louder than any applause. Megan Pierce, who'd built her reputation turning vulnerability into punchlines, now sat strangely quiet. Her fingers drummed against her notepad, but her eyes weren't on the notes. They were on the man across from her. Sylvester Stallone didn't shift under the weight of her stare. His body remained composed, his face unmoved, yet somehow not cold. There was no aggression in him, no need to defend his words. Just the stillness of someone who had learned, through experience, that silence could carry more truth than debate ever could. She cleared her throat, almost as if trying to clear away the emotion in the room. "Look," she began, her voice softer, lower. "I get it. People hold on to what helps them get through." The audience remained hushed, caught in the afterglow of the previous exchange. "But come on," she added with a forced chuckle, reaching for the sarcasm that once flowed easily. "Religion? Faith? It's just a story, right? Like a security blanket we wrap around the scary parts of life. I mean, a divine plan? Comforting, sure, but..." She paused, trying to find the punchline. "Not exactly real." The joke landed weakly. A few chuckles, one half-hearted clap. But the tension in the air remained. Something had changed. Even the studio lights felt warmer, less clinical. As if the room itself had tilted ever so slightly towards something no one could quite name. Stallone didn't flinch. He didn't sigh. He didn't even blink. He simply let her words hang in the air like laundry on a still day, not needing to pull them down or dress them up. Again, his hand rested on the cross, not clutching it, not showing it, just acknowledging it. The camera caught the gesture, the soft gleam of silver against his chest. And for a moment, that simple image held the audience in place. In the control room, someone whispered, "Don't cut. Stay there." Megan tried to keep control of the rhythm, her training kicking in, but the beats weren't landing like they used to. The studio didn't want a show anymore. They wanted something real, something honest. Suddenly, as if unable to resist the urge to provoke again, she leaned forward with a sharper edge in her voice. "I mean, I grew up Catholic. I prayed. Every night. I begged for answers, for help, and all I got was silence." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going, not looking at Stallone now, but past him, as if talking to the space she used to speak into as a little girl. "I remember kneeling by my bed, eyes shut so tight it hurt, whispering, 'Please don't let me be broken. Please let me be normal.' But no one answered. No warmth. No signs. Just silence." Her words came faster now, the mask slipping further with every syllable. "Eventually, I stopped praying. I stopped asking. And then I started laughing. At the books, the verses, the people who still believed. Because that was easier. It felt safer to laugh than to admit I was scared." The audience sat completely still. No shifting, no phones raised, no whispered jokes, just breath and blinking eyes, and the kind of stillness you only find in churches after the sermon's over. Megan glanced down at her lap, her fingers now trembling slightly. She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. So maybe I didn't laugh at your faith, Sly. Maybe I laughed at my own pain. Her voice cracked again, and this time she didn't cover it with a joke. She just sat there, exposed, like a glass sculpture that had finally admitted it was hollow inside. Stallone leaned in gently. His voice, when it came, wasn't designed for performance. It was low, worn, and kind. No one who suffers while praying, he said, is ever truly alone. Someone always hears, even if you don't realize it. That sentence didn't hit like a hammer. It landed like a hand on the shoulder. Something grounding. Something human. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. A man further back lowered his head. The studio had become something it had never been before. Sacred. Megan blinked hard, then let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for decades. I used to think silence meant no one was listening, she whispered. But maybe I just didn't know how to listen back. The camera zoomed out slowly, capturing both of them. Him steady, calm, composed, and her unraveling but not falling apart, just revealing. The truth wasn't ugly. It was raw, and raw had power. And then, without warning, the screen behind them cut to black. No image, no prompt, no transition, just darkness. A heartbeat later, a narrator's voice returned, deep, reflective, almost echoing like it was being whispered in a cathedral. In a world where noise is currency, there is something radical about a man who chooses to live his truth in silence. As the voice faded, the screen showed images not from Stallone's film sets, but from real life. Him at Sage's funeral, standing alone in the Los Angeles morning fog. A surveillance photo from a hospital's cancer ward, where he sat beside a stranger's child, holding the father's hand. A shot taken by a fan, not staged, where he stood at a pier in Santa Monica, staring at the horizon with his arms folded across his chest, as if listening to the waves for answers no one else could hear. The audience was no longer an audience. They had become witnesses. The transformation wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, honest, deep. Megan finally looked at Stallone again. Her voice was steadier now, though still soft. You carry something, she said. Not just grief, not just faith, but something else. He nodded, then shrugged gently. Maybe just a reminder, he said. That pain doesn't have to become bitterness. That silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's just listening back. The cross around his neck shifted slightly as he leaned back. It caught the light, not blinding, but enough to be noticed. Backstage, someone watching the monitor whispered, "This wasn't the interview we planned." Another replied, "No, but it might be the one people needed." Megan sat back, the weight on her shoulders no longer hidden. For the first time in years, she wasn't controlling the story. She was living inside it, and for once, that was enough. After the cameras stopped rolling, the studio didn't erupt in the usual chorus of post-show chatter. There were no fist bumps among producers, no one rushing to clip punchy quotes for the internet, no laughter echoing down the halls. Instead, there was a weight, a presence, like something sacred had settled over the room and refused to lift. People moved slowly, some in silence, some with hesitant glances, as if afraid that speaking too soon might break whatever spell had just been cast. Megan Pierce sat in her dressing room, staring into the mirror. The lights around the glass buzzed softly, casting a golden hue across her face. Her mascara had smudged in the corners of her eyes, not from sweat, from tears. But for once, she didn't reach for a tissue. She just let it be. Online, something unusual happened. The clip of Stallone's quiet words, "If I'm still standing after all that, it wasn't just luck," spread not like gossip, but like scripture. People didn't share it to mock or meme or debate. They shared it because they felt it. It landed in inboxes with subject lines like, "Watch this," just watch. It was passed between fathers and daughters, old friends, people who hadn't spoken in years. And when it arrived, it didn't demand attention. It invited stillness. But the real explosion came from a different spark. Less than 24 hours after the episode aired, a backstage recording surfaced. Someone, an intern maybe, had leaked a private conversation between two producers during the taping. The voices were crisp, unmistakable. "Push him on the faith stuff," one said. "He's not going to snap. That's the beauty of it. He'll just sit there and take it, and we get the moment." Another replied, "You sure? He lost a kid, man. What if it backfires?" The first voice laughed. "That's what makes it better. Vulnerability gets clicks." The backlash was immediate, but it wasn't loud. It was unified, steady, and clear. People didn't cancel the show. They questioned it. They didn't rage. They reflected. Hashtags began to trend, not in anger, but in quiet defiance. "Faith is not entertainment. Let silence speak." Testimonies flooded in. A man from Ohio wrote, "I stopped praying after my wife died. Last night I prayed again. Not because he told me to, because he showed me what surviving with grace looks like." A woman from Arizona posted a photo of her late father's cross, which she had tucked away in a drawer for years. "I wore it today," she wrote, "not for fashion, for memory, for survival." The image of Stallone simply sitting, one hand resting gently on that modest silver cross, became an emblem of dignity, of sorrow, of faith that doesn't need to explain itself. Stallone, for his part, said nothing. No press releases, no interviews, just one image posted on his account 3 days later. A weathered notebook lying on a wooden table, his cross resting atop it, sunlight streaming through a nearby window. No caption, just the photo. It spoke louder than any article ever could. A week later, the network made an announcement. Stallone had agreed to return for a second conversation. No flashy graphics, no fiery teasers. Just one line on a black screen. Some stories deserve more than one chapter. Tickets were gone in minutes. By the night of the live broadcast, a line stretched around the block. People came not to be entertained, but to bear witness. The air outside the Burbank studio felt different, quieter, like before a wedding or a funeral. Inside, the studio had been stripped down. No booming intro music, no high-energy warm-up act. Just 2 chairs, a pair of microphones, and soft amber lighting that made the space feel more like a chapel than a television set. Megan walked onto the stage first, her stride slower than usual, her eyes softer. Gone was the armor of irony. She wore a simple black dress, no flash, no drama. She stood for a moment, looking out over the audience, then took her seat and waited. Then Stallone entered. Same calm walk, same quiet nod, same silver cross. The applause was warm, respectful, restrained. Megan leaned forward slightly, voice lower than last time. "Thank you for coming back." Stallone smiled gently. "Thanks for the invitation." She asked him how he'd been since the last show, but before he could answer, the room went black No warning, no flicker, just total darkness. The monitors died, the spotlights snapped off, the microphones clicked silent. A hum that no one noticed until it vanished, of air vents, cables, whispering crew, was suddenly gone. The studio was swallowed by an eerie, perfect stillness. Not a single person spoke. Not a cough. Not a shuffle. It lasted exactly 10 seconds, but to those inside, it felt like falling into a deep well, a moment outside of time. Megan sat frozen, hands clenched slightly on her lap. Stallone didn't move. He remained still, centered, grounded, as if he'd expected it. When the lights flickered back on and the sound returned, the air felt heavier, charged. Megan turned to him, voice trembling. "I don't know what that was," she said softly. "But I felt it." Stallone met her eyes, and with no theatrics, said simply. Fallon stayed seated for a beat, then slowly stood. He looked out at the crowd, then back at Jennifer and Stallone. "I started tonight thinking we'd get a few laughs and maybe a story about Rambo breaking a rib," he said, chuckling softly. "But instead, we all got a masterclass in love, resilience, and what it means to walk through fire with someone and come out stronger." He turned to the cameras. "If you're watching this at home, rewind it. Watch it again. This wasn't just a segment. This was a moment." Then, in a move that wasn't scripted, Fallon walked over to Jennifer and took her hand with quiet respect, then turned to Stallone and clasped his shoulder. "Thank you both," he said, voice a little rougher now. "Not just for coming, but for showing up fully." Stallone nodded. Jennifer smiled with genuine warmth. And in the final wide shot of the stage, as the audience slowly began sitting down, the camera lingered just long enough to capture one last glance between the couple, a look not of victory, but of understanding. Backstage, as the lights dimmed and the credits began their slow crawl, a producer whispered to Fallon, "That wasn't what we planned." Fallon, holding his cue cards, now bent at the corners, simply nodded and whispered back, "No, it was better." And with that, the screen faded to black. Not with music, not with flash, but with a quiet quote appearing one line at a time. "It's not about who gets the last word. It's about who speaks when the noise finally dies down and still has something worth saying."